We love to have guests come down and take a look at what's going on. We have our full committee here, and I'll let them self-introduce so we can make sure everybody who's watching, maybe for the first time, can put names with the faces. I'm the chairman, John Hall.
Helen Donahue, representative from the Board of Selectmen.
Debbie Homewood, representative from the Planning Board.
Cheryl Doyle, representative for the Conservation Commission.
Peter McFarland.
Patty Griffin Starr, representative from Housing.
Tony Esco, representative of the Historical Commission.
John Apria at large and treasurer.
Joe Greeley at large.
And Peter is the vice chair, just to let everyone know. Now, I'd like to introduce the people who are in the peanut gallery.
Pat DeShane's planning board, planning department and staff for the CPC.
Kathy Carney, contract administrator for the town.
Joe Greeley would have one.
Travis Farley with the Recreation Department.
And we will be hearing more from the last two a little later on in our meeting. You were sent minutes from our last two meetings, and does anyone have, I will accept a motion to approve, and I'll also accept any comments that people may have.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay? Anybody find anything that,
Yeah, are we correcting typos?
yes,
Okay, on the
January
8th. January 8th one, first page.
Last paragraph.
Yeah, last paragraph, it says has, it should had
At a meeting.
a meeting.
anything else, Cheryl?
On the other one, 22nd of January,
It's a separate vote. We'll vote on that. in a
we're
second.
not correcting them both at the
No,
same
we'll just.
Well, you said accept
You said
both
we
of
were.
them.
We do both at the same time?
You did?
Peter's right, do them separately. Great Des is just the 8th.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'm just trying to
As
move it
amended.
along.
As amended,
Yep.
okay? All those in favor?
Aye.
And now, a motion on.
Motion to approve January 22nd.
Second
Seconded, okay, and
correction.
Cheryl?
On the second page, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth paragraph is, should be if. Sixth paragraph is, should be if.
If she had spoken.
Yep. Ask if the bodies, yep. And that's all. Sorry, Patrick.
As amended.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. We now get into what I find one of the most enjoyable parts of this committee meeting, which is
The treasurer's report.
presentations.
Hey, whoa, 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 whoa.
One of the more enjoyable parts, which is presentations from the people advancing the proposals for new projects. And we have two people representing three proposals here. And if I just go on the order of the listing here, our first presenter will be Judith Howard from the Historical Commission on the proposal for Morse House rehabilitation. Judith, I don't know if we can pull a chair up to the corner here so you can be up here with us.
Thank you. Thanks, Travis.
Let you up at the big table.
Excuse my bit.
Okay, Joe.
Whoops.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, the floor is yours.
Judith Howard, Historical Commission. You have a packet, I believe, that has the application and all the attachments to it. I just want to make certain that you have an attachment which is from the assessor's office for 1285 Washington Street. I just want to make sure that you see the record of ownership is the town of Norwood, and the current owner is the town of Norwood Park Department. But the selectmen are the park representative, so that was a question as to who owned the property. But what the Historical Commission is seeking, $50,000 for a feasibility study and a master plan. And initially, we had thought 30,000, and then it was revised to 40, and then on the recommendation of the procurement officer, Kathy Conley, we finally went with 50,000 for that. That will give us a good vision of what it needs to be done at the Moss House. So that's what we want. And we'll answer your questions. Your questions have been answered in the, as well as can be. But it's, a lot of the questions that you asked us is to be determined by the feasibility study. So we have to hire an owner's project manager in order to do that.
Just to reinforce what you just said, a lot of the questions we discussed prior to this meeting had to do with the original proposal's description of an amount of money to be allocated in advance of the feasibility study to do actual work. And you've made that move, I believe, with the change to just the feasibility study.
A master plan, but we also asked Dale Gienap to put in some things that he needed to do and ask some of the questions so that it would make it easier for you to make the decision.
Can you give
Yeah, I gave everything
details
to
on those?
Patrick.
just, can one of you tell us, for those of us who may not have picked that up from the documentation,
Oh,
what are the things that are in the budget
well,
or that are not for the feasibility study and master plan, but for other things that we need to make a decision? Is that, am I understanding you right?
well, a lot of the things that you're asking would be determined by the feasibility.
That part I
study.
understand.
The heating, the HVAC, all those things that you would require would be in.
Okay, so you're just saying that the things we know to make decisions on those will in turn be part of the results of the feasibility
That is
study?
correct.
Okay.
Right.
Tony, please.
If you don't mind, Judith?
I don't.
We were at the selectmen's meeting last night, and we went through a little bit of this, and Gienap Associates, the architect here, he gave a very short summary of some of the types of concerns that would be covered in looking at the at Morse House. So it would be a much more intense assessment of the building's current conditions, and then an assessment of what historically would be needed to bring it up to par, including being able to optimally use it for the 21st century. Last night, when we were at the selectmen meeting, looking for the support letter for the second time, and we've been tabled for 2 more weeks because there was an unexpected, odd conversation, in my view, as to the ownership of the land and whether it was conservation land or not. It's never been deemed conservation land. And I have been on the computer all day today, and the Board of Selectmen numerous times has awarded the previous volunteer committee that was way back in the early 2000s permission to do their volunteer restorations. The Board of Selectmen awarded Bernie Bach funds to the volunteer Morse House Restoration Committee. Why there was any confusion as to what they're making rules and regulations for the Morse House, like they own it, yet they're questioning who's it. It was a little bizarre. I have to admit, I was very polite last night, but I came out of it completely confused. So we are tabled. We are tabled 2 more weeks. David Hajar very nicely said, this is exactly what the Board of Selectmen have been talking about, that we need an assessment of the Morse House. And let me tell you, we certainly do. I've been in that building top to bottom, and it needs an assessment. But I'm not an architect, and I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an ADA compliant officer, and I'm not a building inspector. And if the house is just left to the laissez-faire devices of the town, it will sit there and rot, and then they'll say it needs to be demolished. So we need to make a stand. And if they're confused about the history of the town, which there seems to be some confusion about its importance, we're gonna give some history in 2 weeks. I didn't think it was necessary, since George Morse's name is inscribed on the Board of Selectmen plaque in back of them, but oh well. We will give them some history about Mr. Morse. And I've got plenty of it. And as Judith alluded, in your original packet of the application, the plot plans and the assessor's sheet is here, and it clearly states Town of Norwood. And then it says Park Department. But, you know, Bill Plasko was the only one that brought up the concerns about its, how it could be used. And in an article I saw in the newspaper, there's quotations there that Ed Novick had gone to land court, and that it had been said that it's to be used for the enjoyment of the citizens. We're not hoping to bring in the, you know, the circus or a carnival to the Morse house. It's passive recreation and nice use of the house. That's what we want. Upstairs, there are educational museum materials. There are, of course, questions about ADA compliance for the second floor, but there are ways to get around that. I've been doing a lot of reading. It would involve the town asking for exceptions for the second floor. The majority of the use really is the first floor. We could make some accommodations, you know, once or twice a year. Maybe you could bring the things that are upstairs downstairs, or make a video of upstairs. There's things you can do. The smoke detector should be hardwired, not battery operated. That thing's gonna burn to the ground. Big deal. There's a little buzzer that goes off with the smoke. Nobody's gonna hear it because nobody lives in that house, and it will burn to the ground. They need to be hardwired. It needs better security. Maybe the same security that the town wants to put in their buildings. It probably could use another bathroom, and then you could get more people in it if you had another bathroom, and if you had hardwired smoke detectors. There's a lot of things it needs besides good windows and air conditionings and internet and a telephone. It can be done. But a master plan and feasibility study gives you a roadmap for many years to come to refer to. Can we do all the things at once? No, but it would tell us what needs to be done, what must be done, and we can pick what we can afford to do first. And I'm sure we will get a volunteer committee back together again, but people do not want to volunteer if there's no support. And we need the Board of Selectmen to come up to the plate and say what they really want to do at the house. Because I really don't want to go to the Board of Selectmen meeting every 2 weeks. I really don't. I don't think it's necessary, and it's not conservation land.
We don't think that there's anybody there who is going to oppose it other than perhaps
So many people
one
use that
person.
house.
I'm tempted to say, tell us what you really think.
Thank you. And I was very poised last night, and I'm
Yeah,
glad I
you weren't
was. But I've had
argumentative.
24 hours to think about. I'm going, I do not know what happened there last
Yeah,
night.
we
I
don't.
really don't.
Yeah.
I've got Cheryl and Peter and Patrick, were you?
No, that's correct.
And I also want to pass on the results of the meeting that Patrick and Paul Halkiotis and I had with Tony Mizuko on matters that include this. But I'll start with Cheryl and then with Peter.
Okay. That is not conservation. There's land,
No.
it doesn't belong to Concom. There's no water at all. You're sitting up on a hill,
Right.
and you're too far from the nearest water body. And then on another note, I think it's a great idea that you guys are doing this, because you're being proactive by preventing another Gabriel's Chapel, where the years and years and years go by, and then it costs an arm and a leg to try to restore a piece of history to Norwood. So I'm glad that you're very proactive on it. I think it's a great thing. And I personally think this is an excellent starting point, because you need to know what all the little cobwebs are in that house, and then have a game plan, and then run with it. So kudos.
Thank you. So we're sticking up for it. We're going to go back in 2 weeks.
Peter?
Yeah, my only question is, once the money's allotted for the feasibility study, did they give you any idea how long it was gonna take to do the feasibility study? Because I'm just, it's
2 or 3 months, he
yeah,
said.
yeah, just thinking that the next cycle would be September to November for applying for the next cycle of funds. So if that study's done sometime around then, you could put the second application for
application.
phase 2.
That's what our plan was.
Yeah.
So we respectfully, I mean, if you need more, I think on the first round, we gave you more of the history. I don't know if you need more history, I didn't think you did, but we respectfully ask that you give us, not of our choice, but the selectmen tabled us for 2 more weeks. and we respectfully ask, I know you want the letter of support, although I have to ask, just curious, for example, the old parish cemetery, which is town-owned, that did not, and that's a volunteer group, there was not a letter from the Board of Selectmen in that packet. Just asking.
And I have a copy of their application, and it says that the owner is the town of Norwood.
So
Same thing as ours.
Just saying, you know, if you have a rule, it should be for everybody.
Understood.
And I hope that you wouldn't
Patrick?
penalize us for
I
not
was gonna
having.
say, so that had a letter of support from Mark Ryan, who's the DPW director. I think
We
it's
do too.
different between a parcel of land and a building. So the parcel of land, it's maintained by the DPW, there's no structure there, so I think that's where.
So
the
then
issue
maybe
is.
our rule about that needs to be specific, that you want a structure.
We have a letter of support from
Mark.
Mr. Ryan as well, the director of the
Right, I think the
DPW.
letters from Mark Ryan have more to do with somebody from the town has to say that they are willing to commit to doing the ongoing maintenance, because by law,
Sure.
CPA money
Oh.
can't be applied for that.
Totally understand.
I think the the DPW already does some things at the Moss House now. They do snow plowing, they do, you know,
Grass cutting.
grass cutting, they do a lot of this
Yeah, we
stuff
do.
there already.
But they don't maintain the structure, so that's,
That's through general
Well-
government and through,
yeah.
most of it usually comes through me, as Ms. Howard knows that, when we've had problems over there, broken glass or whatever, it goes through me and I oversee a general government fund that includes 1285 Washington Street, and so we do the repairs, so I work for the general manager, who is responsible for the buildings, and the Board of Selectmen is responsible for the buildings.
But for
Okay,
the
so-
previous 18 years, the director, Dale Day, handled a lot of the repairs and things like that, but it was with the help of the DPW.
I think with the rules of the CPA the way they are, we would need to have support from whoever is gonna be responsible for paying for the maintenance of the building. And that sounds like that would be back to the Board of Selectmen. So if you got support from them, however it's phrased, we have to make sure that you're saying it's okay to support, that you will stand by
Report back in
the
2
obligation to
weeks.
doing the
Yeah.
maintenance. Let me just interject the meeting that we had. You'll recall at our last meeting, we had input from Ms. Carney on the need to have proposals looked at early for her advice on what things cost and how things get done. And I know you said at the start of your presentation that you've done that for this project, but it's a across-the-board kind of concern that sounds like it's developing pretty well. But we also had a request from the general manager that he would like to look at the projects to see whether there are any long-term plans for the town or directions that we were going in that might intersect with what was planned for a particular project, and then we'd get that information to consider when we were deciding about a particular proposal. When Patrick and Paul Halkiotis and I went and met with Tony to make sure that we knew what he meant by that, the example that was cited was the Morse House. And it seemed fairly clear that he's not yet convinced that keeping the Morse House in its, upgraded to its current status is what the long-term of the town would be. I think he wants to get more input from the Board of Selectmen, but it sounds like they're divided and looking for other input and so forth. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to hear from him, but whatever we hear from him isn't binding as long as it doesn't go to the issue of maintenance or some other thing about legal approvals. And I just wanted to make sure the whole committee was aware of the meeting and such. Ms. Donahue.
Thank you. As most of you know, I was one of the original people who worked on the Morse House, and from the beginning. And this all started when Eddie Knolik saw Mr. John Carroll escorting people around there for a possible sale. Eddie warned the South Node Committee. The South Node Committee organized and got going on it. And the selectmen let us have a committee. I think Gary Lee and I were the chairman of the committee, the selectmen's representatives. And they let us do all this work for all those years. And it's been operating successfully as a historical structure for public use. And then, when I was on the board, Tony Mizuko put in his capital outlay $10,000 for a study for the Morse House. And then the talk started about what the Morse House was going to be used for. The Morse House is, in fact, a very historical structure. And it should be used for the public, and it should be maintained. And any other use in the neighborhood could be altered so that the Morse House could stay as it should be. The roof was brought up last night at the selectmen's meeting, question about the roof. That roof is brand new.
Yes.
And the shingles were donated by Certainty, their 50-year shingles. Certainty donated the labor, $16,700 to have a professional put the new roof on the Morse House. The issue about the heating system was brought up about it hasn't been cleaned, okay, but Joe Jacobs got the gas company to donate a brand new heating system, and Joe Jacobs put it in for free as a donation. And so now I think that trying to get it out away from a historical use is unkind. And I think that we have to work together to preserve it. And I think that the selectmen will understand this when we go back in 2 weeks. I think they'll have a clearer understanding about the question. And I think that we'll get their endorsement. So what do we have to do here tonight to progress this application along?
Well, tonight is presentations, so it won't be happening while we're in the middle of the presentation. I think one of the concerns that some of the selectmen and the general manager have are that they think the result of the master plan and feasibility study will involve a figure so high that it is unlikely that work of that level would be approved in subsequent meetings. Now, some of them may be inclined to say, because that's foreseeable, why don't we save the money on the master plan by not doing that either? This is all input, things people are thinking and things they're raising that we can decide to ignore as beside the point or premature, or we can say, yeah, we think that's a problem too. But all of that will happen at the point where we're doing everybody's evaluations, and it's at the end of the meeting where we'll talk about the process by which we're going to document our respective evaluations and then work together to reach a consensus on them. Ms. Donahue?
Thank you for letting me add something. Every single bit of work that has been done on the Morse House to date has been done by a licensed person, if you needed a licensed electrician, a licensed plumber, and every bit of work has been approved by Mark Schubert, the building inspector. We had to go through all kinds of hoops to get to open up the door on the first floor. And that's all that we asked for. And we complied with every handicap requirement, and the doorknob goes this way, the bathroom has to be so many square feet. We have a bathroom that's almost half the size of this room, and it all works. Everything up there is done according to code so far.
Joe, and then John.
Thank you. Maybe directed to Ms. Howard, but the $50,000, can we just get a dissection of that 50? It sounded like a good portion of that is from GNAP for a quote, but then how did we get from whatever that number is to the 50, and would we consider it contingency or
I think,
what's the map? What's
oh,
the
sorry,
map?
I think Kathy can
Please.
answer that, help us
Yes,
better.
definitely. We had the proposals from DNAP Design. However, as you know, once you start looking at an old building, and even his proposal, when he came out from Ms. Howard and took a look, it was he tried to do it as in-depth as he could for free, because he did not charge us for this. However, it's gonna cost some money to go into it, and he's sure to run into things that he hadn't looked at in the proposal. So we've got this proposal, there may be things that come up as well. There would also be pricing for time and materials kind of thing. If there's something not included in here, hourly rates for other professional consultants, he may have to bring in, somebody who's more historic renovation, and you don't know what you're gonna find when you do that. So we wanted to make sure we built in not just a regular contingency, but also if any specialists need to be brought in, that we would have the funds. We don't wanna get into this project and then find out, well, geez, we have a little contingency, but we never thought of, besides the foundation, there's something else that's going on in there. So it was based on that.
So what's the value of the quote versus the 50? That was, my question was, what's the contingency? It's 50,000 minus the quote, and what's the quote, and what's the contingency?
I think the quote was like 160.
No, it
Was it
means the proposal from GNAP.
Right, that's right.
$30,000 was his quote itself. It was 15 for,
Oh,
I
I'm
believe, a
sorry.
master plan, and 15 for
Yeah.
a
That is
Master
correct.
plan.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 15 and 15?
it was,
Or-
yes.
So, thank you. So the
That was
contingency,
30.
Yeah, get closer.
contingency is 20. Can that be,
I'm sorry?
so the contingency is 20?
It is, but it's not a full contingency, because as I said, contingency is usually something small that you're gonna run into. This is more, when you start hiring a specialist, because he looked at it as a designer coming in, but
So-
not as, a historical restorer to the existing building.
So we have a, whatever you wanna call it, a bid, a quote, whatever, from GNAP, for 2 pieces for 30. So we don't have anything else that gets us from 30 to 50?
Actually, if I may, there is a contingency here. It says $21,000 right in it.
2160.
But that's, isn't
For
that,
construction.
that's the 160,000 document, or whatever that's the 240,000 document?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to ruffle the feathers, but if we have a piece of paper that says 15 plus 15 equals 30, and we're asking for 50, I just wanna know, because town meeting members they get paid big bucks to be shopped, right? So somebody's gonna ask the question rightfully, so how do we get from A to B to C?
Chairman, if I could just add something.
Please, John.
Not to cut you off. So Joe actually asked the same question I was gonna ask in regards to the funds. But I just wanted to narrow in on one thing. So if you go to, page 2, it's labeled as page 2 at the bottom of the quote from DNAP. It's like an Excel spreadsheet printed, sort of a third of the way down, there's some fees listed that total $54,150. Now, I don't know if all 4 of those are for the study and the master plan, or if maybe the top one is for the construction as an afterthought. But it seems to me like, and my question in regards to Joe's as well is, as accountants, we like to make sure things tie out, and we can say, okay, based on this application, here's the supporting document, and, the numbers match. So, yeah, can we have clarity on the 54,150?
Or it may be that they constructed the current bid, I think, was not based on building up from the 30 directly,
Yeah.
or on incorporating some but not all of the fees. But the problem that Joe and John are describing is, we can't really see what it does. I get the general point that says they've looked at it more closely, and they realize that they're going to need perhaps a wider range of skills to go in and assess the different aspects of it, and that they're making an estimate of what it will cost to get the information from all the respective parties. But we don't see that math. And if there are fees that also would need to be paid at this stage, and I'm not sure that's the case, we don't know what those are. So I think what we need is a bit more detail in what makes up the 50,000 that you got from EDAP.
I'll send them an email.
Cheryl?
Can you also, Judith, ask them why on section 2 under architectural engineering fees,
Right.
it has existing conditions study fee, but it has it twice, one at 8 and one at 15.
Yeah, I'd
Can
have
you
to-
ask them to clarify
I'd
it?
have to ask, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the 16,100 might be part of the construction piece and not part of the study piece. It's just to get clarity on that as a separate item.
Can I
Cheryl.
follow up? I think for on architectural engineering, the architect will know all the ADA compliance, because that's normally who you go through to find how you have to be compliant on everything like that. The engineering, I would lay odds, they're gonna go down in that basement, and they're gonna look at the footings, they're going to look at the foundation. They're also gonna look to see if anybody has drilled through any of the floorboards or the support, to see if you have to assist or anything along those lines. So they're gonna be looking at a lot of that. So,
They
I-
did
I-
the preliminary.
yeah, but
They
you
went
need,
down cellar and everything. That's why we
Yeah.
wanted the other part, so that they can look even further.
yeah.
Because it was just a cursory, look at the
Looking,
whole
yeah.
thing, from attic to cellar.
But that engineer, because if your bottom foundation of any house, rule of thumb is, if the bottom isn't structurally sound, the rest of it is not structurally sound.
Well, it's been there since 16.
That's why I think
76
you
and
have that engineer.
1868. Yeah.
The engineering fee is where it is
Is,
because
right.
of the bottom,
That is correct.
yeah.
Tony?
Thank you. Actually, much of the information is actually in the two-page body of the memo page.
Yeah.
That's where he describes two different pieces of the project, 15 and 15. But as he says in his letter, this is not intended as an exhaustive study. And our concern was, when we talked to Kathy, that he says, in the range of 15,000 for this and that. But what if the master plan, and the feasibility study more like 20,000, so that's 40. So we didn't want to constrain ourselves. There's no mention in here about, having an expert come in about the beehive oven, or what it would cost to restore that, or, what it would take to do windows or air conditioning. He talks about meetings with the historic commission, and time has to be paid for that. So, in talking to Kathy Carney, who has so much more experience with contracts and cost of studies, it was felt that we shouldn't constrain ourselves to the 30,000. We were more comfortable with the 40 or 50, and so, we can try to get more definition, but as previously said, GNAP has not sent us a bill for this cursory study, and there's only so much you can do for the application. As he says, once he gets, if you read this body of the letter, there's a lot to look at in this house. So, and while yes, it's true that there's accessibility, that there's a door, it's not an automated door. There's a lot of things we'd like to increase for the ADA compliance, to have a button, a push button, to have an electrical junction at the door, and some doors are plate, So there's really a lot to do. And then, of course, and it's not gonna get done overnight. All of, this is a plan. That's what plans are.
Multi-year.
Yes, and the reason we want it is because now there is a Community Preservation Act and a committee, and you can make plans. It's very exciting that you can make plans, and we don't have anything now in Norwood that can be saved. Everything's gone. Everything's gone. This is it, folks, the Morse House. The bylaw that was passed months ago for large properties like Oakview Mansion does not require that a large home with 4,000 square feet, I think it was, or more, it's an option they have to divide their house up into separate units if they so say that they will keep the exterior historically correct. Remember that bylaw? It's only an option, it's not a requirement. So there's no historic house in Norwood except the day house that was also, under the Historical Society as a gift. There is no insured preservation. There is no demolition bylaw. There's no bylaw that requires the exterior old house to be saved or any house to be saved. The Morse House is in Norwood. And it's old. The owner was wonderful. The salt box, there's a small part of the salt box house, which is one of the very first settlements in what was considered, previous to Norwood's incorporation, back to 1600. That's it.
Okay, I know Kathy has some comments, and I know Helen has some more comments. Let me start by saying where I think we are. If I just go with the memo, it also says $15,000 for fees of the condition study, $15,000 for fees for the master plan. That's $30,000. That doesn't involve any cost for the labor of doing the studies, which I guess they were going to donate, but maybe that's not true. So the $20,000 could be some combination of, now we have an estimate for the labor, and it also could be a contingency, which was Joe's theory. And I think Kathy can shed some light on all of that. But before I do that, just so we don't spend a lot of time on things that I think are already proven, except for that one comment at the selectmen's meeting, I haven't heard anybody who questions the historic status and importance of the Morse House. I don't think those issues are likely to show up in anything other than favorable status in our discussions. I also have not heard anybody anywhere question the professionalism of the work that's been done. So I don't think we need to shore up the case on either of those points. We need to have, to be sure we know what the bid is from. And with that, I'll turn that over to Ms. Carney.
Thank you. I just want to mention, I believe that Ms. Howard contacted Dale Gainap, the owner of Gainap Architects, and just let him know what they were looking to do and trying to get a figure for this. Mr. Gainap came out on his own without being paid, and he doesn't donate time, but he came out because he's done so much work in the town, and he knows, he knows us. But in coming out and doing this, what he gave us was really a budget. It's not a proposal for him to do the work. It's an idea of this is what ballpark figure you might be looking at. What you would normally do, as most of you know, is you would get a written proposal which would say we're going to hire an engineer, an architect, an HVAC person, on and on, window specialist, and these are going to be the hourly rates which we are going to charge for those specialists. And we estimate 200 hours or 150 hours to do an analysis of that. He did not go into detail with who he's going to hire, or if he got this project, and what work they were doing and how long it would take. So it's definitely a ballpark figure. This is not a quote, it's not a proposal. It was a memo to Ms. Howard saying, here's an idea of what I think you're going to need. I would also, my personal opinion is that the $30,000 is tight. For the things that I've seen done and the work that we've had performed in the past and the age of the house, it is tight. To have a $20,000 contingency would be normal for me because you don't know what you're going to get into. As Ms. Doyle said, you could run into all kinds of issues with the foundation when you're bringing in not only structural engineers but also water specialists for what's running in underneath there. Because it's a historical building, you're going to bring historical preservationists, I'm assuming, in there to look at it structurally. And it sounds easy to say, well, handicap, yeah, we took the doorknob off, we changed it over, we made it handicap accessible. Maybe that was okay, however many years ago that it was done, but in today's world, as we found here at Town Hall, the building code changes so much that just doing those things doesn't really cut it anymore, and there are more involved things for ADA compliant. And yes, he's going to know what the ADA requirements are in the building code, but again, it's a historic house. He's gotta calculate what are the costs gonna be if we go to request a waiver? What could we get a waiver for, what would they not? Because there's no way that the architectural board is going to give a waiver for the entire building and say nothing needs to be accessible. So those are gonna be additional costs that are gonna be incurred, and part of the proposal, you know, once we figure out what exactly is you're gonna do and who's you gonna bring in. But this isn't a proposal, this is a, Ms. Howard, I'm sure, I don't wanna speak for you, but I'm assuming it was, can you come down, we need some kind of an idea and a budget, what do you think would happen? And he came down and spent maybe an hour or so
Yeah.
with you walking around, but it would have been he himself and not bringing in the structural engineer, not bringing in everybody that he normally would if he's going to put a proposal together.
So, just to be sure I understand it, $50,000 buys us a master plan and a condition study, but it doesn't buy us a proposal either.
He's not gonna charge, he's not gonna charge for a proposal, that is, he would be getting together a true proposal. These figures here were.
If we said go
If
ahead,
you said, okay, now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna hire you to do these things, then he and I would sit down and negotiate, okay, who do you need to bring in? What is your rate? Here's what the going rate is. Let's look and see how many hours need to be done. That's really when you get into the nitty-gritty of what the actual cost is gonna be on a proposal. But this was just to get some figures in so Ms. Howard and the Historical Commission could say, we're looking at doing this. And we did not want to, they did ask me on amounts, and we did start with 40,000, and then it was, geez, I know in town hall, because I maintain town hall, you open up one wall and you don't know what you're going to get into. And the same thing with the study, you start drilling a hole here and there, you don't know what you're gonna find, and who you're gonna have to bring in to do a better analysis of what there is.
Cheryl,
Can I just follow up? I think what threw this whole thing off is if just this cover letter would have been submitted without the spreadsheets and that, because the spreadsheets, when you look at it, I think it was just for the historic to be looking at it, to see what you
So
might
they
be
knew that it
getting.
wasn't gonna be a $50,000 fix for construction, but I think to
But
give them a better idea.
This is an idea of what it could possibly cost, but it's not what it's gonna cost. But if you just stuck with this, it actually covered the 50. But when you started looking at the other figures, you're like, it gets confusing. But I think it was great that he gave you this information.
Who was doing this?
Because then you're not looking at, $2 or $3 million.
Right.
How he ballparked it, it's actually reasonable. It's doable. Even if his figure's a little on the low side, this is all, it's doable. And
See, we
it's
had-
not that bad.
We had
It
no
really-
idea at all about what was needed or
Yeah.
anything. So that's why, and he was wonderful, he came himself. I think he brought a engineer with him from the firm, but they were working on another project, totally different from this, and they came down. And so in an hour, they did this, and I have to thank them.
But that's why we say it's
wait,
not
wait,
exhaustive.
let's get some airtime over here.
Thank you. Sometimes they say less is better. So we were operating there for all these years, and we got an awful lot done there. We really did, and in regard to, here's a little tiny example. We got the money, the Simones gave us thousands of dollars. We got money from the Block Fund, and we know that we want to redo that beehive oven because it's a very important historical part of the house. We got an estimate from a union bricklayer who worked all of his life in union bricklaying in Boston, including the Moakley Courthouse and other important structures, and he's retired now. And we have a bid for like $2,000 to do the brick oven. Eddie Knolik got that bid. It's ballpark $2,000. Now, sometimes everything's too technical. We spent all this time about all these studies, and we could have just got the oven done, you know what I mean? But it's okay if you want to go along and get all these studies done and stuff and make sure the whole place is sound. But sometimes less is just better.
Okay, let me take another try at where I think we are. The more I hear from Ms. Carney, the more I doubt that there's really anything much in the way of details or clarification on the origins of the 50,000 that we could ask for, because it wasn't done in that kind of a systematic way. It is what it is. On the other hand, we know that you folks are going to be talking to the selectmen in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, right.
We know we need to have two things from the selectmen. One is an agreement that if the work was done down the road, they would be willing to do the maintenance to make sure that that's done. Or you can get that from Mark Ryan directly, which I think you may already have done. The other, which is more tricky, is if they're the ones who technically own the property as the park commission, then they have to say, we're willing to allow your vendor to go in there and conduct the tests, some of which are destructive tests, opening a wall and so forth. We're willing to let you do that if you've got a funded project to do that. Am I right about that, Kathy?
Yes, anything like that. As I said, any of the proposals would come through the purchasing department, and I would be speaking with the town manager and saying, this is what we're going to do, and making sure that it was okay. So I don't just hire a consultant without getting the higher-ups to approve
Okay.
it.
At the stage of us assessing the proposal, do we need or should we get something in writing from either the town manager or the Board of Selectmen or both that says, if you go ahead and fund this project, we're okay with you doing the tests that are proposed herein?
I believe that that would be the case. I would say start with the town manager, because.
Okay, so I would encourage you folks to try to get those if you can, and we're gonna need them within a couple of weeks, because we're gonna be well into the deliberation and decision stage starting next month, which is about 2 weeks away. Anybody else have any essential points or questions?
The only thing, I walked the site the other day. There's a big fat squirrel up in the attic.
I'm sure there are, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, he was sitting there sunning himself in the front window. It's like, God, he's a healthy one.
Well, that's just nuts.
Always John.
Not sure I can follow that.
Or want
Or want to. But somewhere along the line, we did say that we have to, like, this is the only application, this is the only project ahead of us, is in front of us, I should say, the feasibility study. So there's no indication that the owner of the building either will or will not, go with phase 2. But so we know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. But I think it's important for us to get feedback from the selectmen, because if their answer, despite what I just said, if they go neutral on this, I'm not quite sure if that gives us an indication. It's not a no. But if they come back to us and say, the current board, selectmen right now, the selectmen they wouldn't authorize this phase 2, like $200,000 worth of spending. I think we would really have to take that into account, because before we spend this 50, because if the owner of the building is not willing to accept like further work at all, then that's a problem. I don't know if I didn't get the feel that we're all on that same page. That's why I'm saying this, that if the selectmen either don't say anything or they say yes, then that's okay. And, as far as I'm concerned, that's a green light. But if they come back wholeheartedly and say, we have reservations about the building, we have reservations about the location, the condition, blah, 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 and we would not authorize work going forward. I think in a phase two, I think that seriously causes, casts a shadow on phase one here. That's
Just,
again, that may have been said, but I don't think it, that's kind of the way I feel, that if they came back and said no on phase two, then we need to take that into account on phase one.
Peter?
yeah, see, in this project, I see no difference between this and St. Gabriel's Chapel, because same thing, it was a gifted property to the town. The town has taken it, and it's the thing about preserving it. I mean, I don't see any difference, and I don't think the selectmen, I don't think, are gonna split hairs on that. So I think these are, relevant properties to the town, and they're not gonna let anything deteriorate to a point where, when they get a chance to do something about it. So I have confidence that they'll, step up to the plate and endorse the project all the way through, as far as, maybe not the elevator to the second floor, but, something, to a certain degree.
Right.
I mean, making the building safe and usable and enhancing it, that might be where the line gets drawn as far as that goes. But I think that's what, the mindset. I've talked to a couple of them, and they just wanted to make sure that first there was a plan, this is the plan, and now we go to phase one, get the plan, phase two, we do what work, maybe a phase three if it's, something else down the road that we can, put off or pay for in a later date or something like that, so.
Judith, I think you wanted to say something?
That's why we were a little perplexed when we went to the board, when one of the selectmen said, we don't know who owns it. There was a question as to who owned the property. But it was in your packet, from the assessor's office, that it's the town of Norwood, park department that is the owner of the property. So we're gonna revise it a little bit, and when we come back in 2 weeks, we'll have the ownership, even though they said they have to go, contact town council, but I think that's superfluous, actually. But we'll go with the history, and even though they have it, we'll go with the assessors, even though they have it. So we'll be ready. They were the ones who were not ready. They even told us that the first time around. They were
Well,
not
just
ready.
to stick up for my friends, this select board, they come in every week and they see a big stack of thick packets, and if they don't catch every detail in each one, I'm willing to cut them a break. And you've done that, or had to do that. Debbie, you had a comment?
Could I ask Ms. Carney the question?
Of course.
Okay, just to help me out, is it town manager then the selectman, or is that a combo of who decides if they would be willing to maintain the building if all of this goes through?
I can't answer that. I know that for me, I would have to go to the town manager, and he has said that he is responsible for the buildings, and I believe that may be in the town charter. I may have that wrong, but he has the responsibility, and the Board of Selectmen have the responsibility of all buildings, including, like, school buildings actually fall under the Board of Selectmen for any work that's gonna be done, any construction. So I would say the ultimate authority would probably be the Board of Selectmen. However, for me, it's always go to the town manager first, and then you direct him from there.
Okay, and is it going to fall under, if DPW maintains it now, but we have a new facilities manager, is it going to go under that umbrella?
Eventually, all of the buildings, my understanding is that they'll come under it. So eventually it will be. Right now, I believe that Mr. Ryan and the DPW, they take care of the exterior of the building. I know that, as I said earlier.
And Dale's taking care of the group.
The account for 1285 Washington is in the general government fund that I oversee, and I spend the money on that part for any of the building repairs and things. So he takes care of the outside, and then general gov, for the town manager, takes care of the building itself.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yes.
Real quick. So what are we waiting for? from the selectmen? I mean, we,
Actually, that was gonna be my question.
Well, we
With a
think
different
alike.
structure to it, yeah, well, as we
Letter of
always do.
approval.
Let me come back to that and let Helen put her.
Thank you.
point in.
A couple of things. Mrs. Connie, you're right. It's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility for all the buildings in the town. The manager is just the person that works for the Board of Selectmen. And Ms. Howard, you brought up another point. I bet you that wasn't a full board there last night. Mr. Howard was absent.
That's
And-
correct.
And I think that if that discussion came up and Mr. Howard was there, that would have been the third vote that you needed on the first round. And I don't think that all of those other issues would have come up, because Mr. Howard has been a true backer of the Morse House throughout my past 18 years. And he has been very supportive of the Morse House.
Thank you.
My version of what Debbie was asking was, see if I've got this straight about what are the three answers you might get from the selectman and/or the town manager. One answer is, by all means, we're in favor of the feasibility study, and we're looking forward to figuring out what is required in order to restore this property to what we described here. The second possibility is, no, we're not willing to have you do this study. We don't want to have somebody go in and be opening up walls and so forth. We're not in favor of that. And the third, middle possibility is the one that Joe put forward, which is, fine, go ahead and do the study. You know, we won't stand in your way. We'll even say we're giving permission for you to do this. But we already have a majority viewpoint here that says that this is gonna cost more than we're willing to spend for a project of this sort. And so we would be in the position of saying, okay, if we go ahead with the feasibility study anyway, we're basically rolling the dice that we're gonna be able to convince them otherwise when we get the results in. And that's happened before. It happened with the chapel. Took many, many years before repeated attempts got that kind of support. But it would certainly be something that this committee would need to consider in our deliberations. Now, am I right that those are the three possible answers? And if they come in with something that's more vague than that, that's gonna make our decision that much harder. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I
Sure.
don't think that your third concept was accurate. I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but the selectmen, it's town meeting who says whether the money goes for a community preservation project.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying.
But in the long run, if Mr. Mizuko put $10,000 in his capital outlay budget for a study, and so he wanted a study of the building to see how the structure was. Now the money will come from us, so it won't hit the taxpayers. They've already paid the tax once. That's one point. Another point is that if the townspeople put the pressure on the selectmen and indicate that they want to preserve the historical structure, then it's their duty to follow what the townspeople want, and then we can finish it up at town meeting.
Cheryl, and then Tony.
Okay, I might be missing the boat here somehow, I'm not sure, but there's a bucket for historic. If this is the only house that we have to preserve, then that means there's gonna be money every year going into the historic pot, just sitting there, that you cannot use for anything else by law. So to me, it would make no sense to go, no, we don't want the study, no, we don't want you preserving it. Well, you can't use the money for anything else. So it doesn't make sense in my book. Why wouldn't you? Because you don't want another Gabriel's Chapel, because that one actually costs the town money, the taxpayers' money. We have the money coming out every quarter. And then every time somebody registers, orders the conditions at the Registry of Deeds and all that, you're getting the money. That's where all our CPC money comes from, is all that. So I think your fight is, not costing the town any money. We already got the money, we already got the pot. Why don't we go for it?
You make a powerful case, but it depends on a very literal reading of Tony's comment about there isn't any other historic place in the town. And I think there are all kinds of historic preservation projects that aren't necessarily contingent on finding a new place. They may be simply changing the perspective on places that exist. The pumping station would be one. There may be subsequent calls from the chapel.
East Walpole Cemetery.
Yeah, so I don't think it's, this is our last chance, don't blow it situation. I wouldn't agree with that characterization. Tony and then Judith.
Well, not to be repetitive, but the vision I see with the master plan is that it is multi-phased, multi-year, and that we would come back, I'm sure, to this committee to take on hopefully another little chunk of a project, certainly not huge sums of money. I agree there probably are some other things we've talked about, maybe scanning, archiving some other old documents, things like that. But certainly in small pieces, it would be great to know that we could maybe come for 10,000 or whatever, for many years to come until we get what needs to be done. And that does not preclude that the Friends of the Morse House can't regroup and start fundraising again. But you fundraise knowing that you have the backing of the town fully, not just, in loose words, but with actions behind it. And I could really see that there'd be a lot of liveliness for support and fundraisers for the Morse House as well.
I'm going to let that be the last word because we've used up 60 of our 75 minutes for presentations. And poor Travis over here, who has children at home, would like to get on our agenda.
Thank you.
We'll have another chance to hear from you after you meet with the selectmen again. And I expect most of these issues will still be live. Judith, thank you very much for coming and leading this discussion. It's been very helpful. Got a lot of...
May I just make one comment? We only went there for a letter of permission and support. That was the point of going to the Board of Selectmen, and that's what you requested.
Yes, and unfortunately, the board, trying to be helpful, decided to start micromanaging some of the work, and that rarely goes well. Thank you again, appreciate it. And now I'd like to invite Travis Farley up to the table to talk to us about his two projects.
Takedown for a reason.
Serious.
Yeah, you're gonna pull it up, probably. Oh, yeah.
Welcome, Travis.
Thank you very much for having me.
Please pass on to your number two.
Yes.
Congratulations on this nice award.
Yes, very exciting for the Mass Rec and Park Association.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, Katie was nominated to be the new professional of the year at the Mass Rec and Park Association. So she will be honored at her state conference in March in Falmouth, so. good
Great.
award. Yeah, Falmouth
Well
in
done.
March.
She's a very kind person.
Yes, she's a hard worker.
And so you've got two proposals, and the first one listed is the basketball court rehabilitation.
Yep.
I imagine we had a couple of questions, we always do.
Yeah.
So,
hoping to, oddly enough, this timing is really good too. I was hoping to update you on two of the past projects too, for the Balch and the Bond Street when we conclude as well, if that's okay.
sure.
So yeah, the Murphy Court rehabilitation, pretty straightforward. The basketball court on the corner of Pleasant and Lenox, we would just like to try to rehab that outdoor court. It's a beautiful park. It's got a baseball field right there and a playground. We're hoping just to resurface that court. And then this is an old app. I think I might have put it out, not updated, but the backboards we took out, we're hoping to add some handicap parking as well as a trail, stone dust trail, for make it a little more accessible to the public. I don't think there's any handicap parking down there currently. This would make the park a little more accessible as well.
So since we are not allowed to do projects that are maintenance,
Yep.
we want to focus on the part of this that isn't. And it sounds like accessibility features are at the center of your case for that.
Yep, and the court itself is not something we traditionally do for just like year-to-year maintenance. This is like a substantial resurfacing and rehab of the basketball court, similar to what we're doing at the Bulge. We've done capital projects, privates, Savage, resurfacing as well. So this isn't like a year-to-year maintenance project that we're looking to do, like replacing nets or backboards or anything like that. Pretty much substantial than that.
Now, I know that a couple of members of the committee wanted to bore in on that, so
Yeah.
Thank you.
it's on you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Travis, Mr. Farley, when you said Stone Dust Path, have you seen for handicapped accessibility, it's like a grate that can even go along stone dust or sand? Because I've seen at, for the Cerebral Palsy Camp on Martha's Vineyard,
Yep.
they have a grate that goes right over the sand. The wheelchairs can go right to the water.
Oh, yeah, it's like a rubber mat that they put over. I used to work in Marble at the North Shore. We had an ADA playground on the beach, and we had those all over the place. Yeah, they're connecting mats that you put on the beach, and yeah, you can use those. Those can be used seasonally. Maybe we even look into concrete, if stone dust that was just an option.
Stone dust gets washed away,
Yeah.
and it can get into ruts.
Yeah.
But the grate with the wheelchairs is better.
Yeah, and the project itself, that is an element that we can work with the DPW on, so I'm confident that that would be a minimal cost, whatever we decide to do. Whether it's concrete, stone dust, it's not gonna be a big financial hurdle for us.
Would the grades be significant if you went that route?
Cost-wise, I think it would be a little more cost, and it would be a little more seasonal to take out, because I think you wouldn't keep them, on the North Shore, when we had them, we took them out at the end of the summer and put them back in the spring, so it'd just be a little bit more maintenance. It's a great idea, so we can look into that too. I just don't have those costs in front of me right now.
Could you, in a brief period of time,
Yeah.
send us any changes to your proposed budget if you think this is worth keeping as a live option?
Oh, yeah, that's not a problem at all. I can get that pretty easily.
Thank you. Cheryl?
I'm here still on your side. But, say we agree to resurface these. How are you maintaining them then? Because if you say you don't have a budget to maintain the asphalt or the surface of it, because you're still gonna have to maintain them because asphalt needs maintaining. You have to crack seal or reseal them or anything, because you said these are like 10 years old. Are you gonna come back in 10 years again and go, I want more money to resurface it again, or is this something you're going to maintain?
Through capital or through CPC, I mean, it is, with concrete and the winter and the weather, it's hard to say, like in 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line. I know the last few years, between us and the DPW, we've really made an effort to resurface all the courts in town, whether that be Savage, the Ivitt Tennis courts we've done within the last few years, and those are in great shape. I know Mark just did, and we worked with him on Doherty, we did a basketball court there. So it's not, those projects, I mean, if you notice something that is that happens that year, you can kind of address it, but I mean, that is like 5, 10 years down the road, it could be, I mean, there's so many different variables with the weather and routes that could factor into, I unfortunately don't have a year to year, like this is what we're gonna hope to do in 10 years, 15 years. If the court stays in great shape, then it could be 15 years down the line. So I don't really have a set.
I don't think you got that. Say we give you the 12,000, this gets resurfaced. Do you have it in your budget to do the maintenance then on it to maintain it? That's what I'm asking. This court, not the other courts, because
The courts that we do, like Savage, for example, or Doherty or Ivets, haven't required any maintenance. We've done zero maintenance to those courts since we've done the projects. And those are, Ivets, for example, we're around 4 or 5 years since we resurfaced those courts.
Okay. Are you gonna resurface this one the exact same way you resurfaced
Yeah.
them then?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's just patching the cracks and then giving it a coat of paint essentially over the court itself, because right now it's just bare concrete.
Cheryl, anything else on that?
No, because I think I misunderstood what he was doing.
Okay. Debbie?
Jude?
Okay,
What color do you want it to be?
good, no. If we're gonna spend $17,000 of the taxpayers' money, which is, this is a good use of it, I believe, could we make it a little nicer looking? Could we put a bench and some
Yeah.
trees, some plant, well, why not? You all expect me to say it anyway, okay?
Planning now, she's back to the trees.
Well,
if you did it.
okay, thank you. But it's a,
Yeah.
Shrubs, something.
it's not attractive. It's, you go down there, you stand down there.
Yeah,
I
there's
was
no-
down
there's
it,
no- On the basketball court right now, there's no benches, so that would be something I'd like to add within the, and we do actually have a playground budget that, it's not a huge budget. We have playground items where I can add, but I can definitely include benches in the project. I didn't really want to go,
Well,
No,
before you do that, Patrick, is there any issue in terms of the language of the law about including things like this as a rehab?
No, it's part of rehabilitation, so it's.
Fine, that takes care of
yeah.
that
So-
issue.
it's, I understand that it's a basketball court, it's a, you're gonna
Yeah.
use it, you're gonna shoot basketballs. And then you might wanna walk down there and look at something that's not a black basketball court. Ugh.
Yes.
Go someplace
Okay.
else.
Well, the other towns get pretty things around their basketball courts, why can't we?
No,
And lines would be nice.
Okay,
it'll make a big difference.
Cheryl.
She just triggered something. Is this a concrete court or an asphalt court?
I'd have to double check. I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's asphalt. I know
And
it's
what
just all
color is
concrete.
it right now? It's black, then it's asphalt.
Well, it's kinda gray.
Yeah.
Then it's well, it's asphalt then. It's asphalt. How thick, do you know how, you don't know how thick it is or anything?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Because if you have a thicker pour on your asphalt, believe it or not, it'll last longer.
Yeah. They put that playground in, they put the court in with the playground, and that was in 2009, so it's closing in on 10 years. And
Okay.
so minimal wear and tear since then. Hopefully, if we address the cracks that you see in the picture and then, and do this project, I'm hoping you shouldn't need to do anything in the next 10, 15 years.
Mr. Greeley?
I guess I want to make sure, I'll draw a comparison between this project and like the tennis courts,
Yep.
for instance. If we back up, the tennis courts, we just approved the resurfacing, what, a year and a half ago or so?
The Savage courts, yeah, that was 2 years ago. The Ivets tennis courts
Right.
we did, those were grant funded, and those were like 4 years ago.
Yep. So on the Ivets,
Yep.
behind the, behind the senior center.
No,
That's
it's a,
Savage.
Savage, I'm
Yep.
sorry. So on the Savage ones, if the CPA funds were available at that time,
Yep,
and if we said, okay, we want to resurface the court, and it was in dire need, I'm not questioning
Oh,
the
yeah.
need to do that. We repurposed the court to go to like different, like a different venue, like pickleball and
Yep.
other things, so we repurposed it, so that was also thrown into the mix. But the majority of that was a resurfacing and a rehab of the surface.
yeah, they addressed some of the cracks that we had. Obviously, there was a lot of cracks. The court was in not great shape, so they addressed the cracks, and it was a resurface of the courts themselves, yeah.
Okay. So, and that one was all funded with capital money, not operating money, but capital funds.
Correct.
So if the CPA were available a couple of years ago when that first came up,
Yep,
and if we said, okay, we're gonna resurface it, I don't know, let's say it was $15,000, just to throw out a number. If we said at the same time, we wanna make it more ADA accessible, because the fence gates in there are tight.
yep,
So we wanna widen the gates, we wanna, improve the access from a parking area, some parking area to the court. And we want to turn this into more of an ADA compliant area. So that might have gotten that property from like 15,000 to 17,000,
Yep,
Right.
for example, yeah,
for example.
yeah.
So now we fast forward to this, and the path I'm going down is I really think we need to think twice, because in this case, just as that case, if in that scenario, that we would have spent $15,000 to resurface and rehab the facility, I guess. But then we would have tacked on another couple of $1,000s for ADA compliance, which I'd be all for anyway.
Yep.
But I don't want to get into the habit, just thinking about this Murphy Field request. I don't want this to say, okay, we're going to spend $12,000 for the resurface, and if we add another couple of $1,000s, immediately it becomes, instead of resurfacing, which should be either capital or operating, now all of a sudden we can call it something different. I don't want to stray into the, okay, if we slap on a couple of $1,000s, if we take it from 12,000 to 14,000, now we can convert it from capital to CPA money. I think this is literally, configuratively, it could be a slippery slope, that it opens the door to every other recreation facility in town, that if we just tweaked the project a little bit, we would get away from the capital need. And now in your defense, you come back and you're brainstorming, and I give you all the credit in the world, but I don't want to turn this into the rec department feeder program or any other department feeder program that 2 years ago it was coming out of capital, but now all of a sudden we call it something different.
Yeah.
We tweak it, and now it becomes
No, I
CPA.
I understand where you're coming from.
CPA friendly.
I like the Bond Street project, for example, the driving force for that was to make the playground more accessible. And you're right, a few years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do
Right.
that Ford Rubber playground at that spot, because
Right.
we'd be using wood chips. It
And
is a handicap accessible option, but it's not a great option.
Right.
And
I didn't use that
Yeah, yeah,
example
no.
because I think that's a much better
The
picture.
Balch one, I think putting the handicap ramp in that project was great, and I think it makes it a heck of a lot more accessible. I don't even think there's any handicap parking down there right now, which is a terrible thing, I think. And that wasn't like a tack on, that project was like 140 grand, and then that handicap ramp is a little over half the project. So I understand what you're saying, and I guess this Murphy one is a good example of that, because the project itself is like 12, and you're just throwing on, and I can understand that perspective of it.
I don't want it to turn into lipstick on a how did
Yeah.
that thing go?
Hey.
Right, I didn't finish that, just for the record. But,
No, I understand.
right, I don't, like, we need to kind of keep that in mind. I guess I'll speak for myself.
Are you pushing back on the pretty trees? Is that what you're doing?
I didn't say anything about flora or fauna or anything else, but I don't want to open the door
Yeah, makes sense.
and just tweak something that used to be
Yeah.
capital, and now we're just feeding the beast. Because you got a lot of, nothing, you're doing a great job.
28 ball fields, or
Yeah.
28 ball fields, and 9 playgrounds, so yeah, there's a lot,
Yeah.
so it's.
So, thank you. I'm sorry to monopolize it, but.
Do we have any other questions that would affect our decision? Would help to clarify anything?
I have a comment.
Good.
Down deep in my heart, I don't think it's so bad that we go and try and make things better like that and
Yeah.
use the money and make it handicapped accessible for people. I think if we can do it, we should do most we can.
I appreciate that.
Right, but if I could,
Oh, come on.
But there's a-
We understand what you're saying.
okay, but there's a point where we're running afoul of CPS.
Yeah, we get that.
I got you,
Thank
makes
you.
sense, makes
Thank you.
sense. This is, the Murphy
Thanks,
Field,
Peter.
the Murphy Court project is a good example of that, because the handicap, the ADA accessibility is only a small portion of the project, so that makes sense.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else jumping in, so let's go to your second project.
Yeah, so this one is, yeah,
No.
this is a big one. So this, and I apologize for changing this kind of halfway through. This started out as a rec feasibility study of just everything rec related, outside, inside, what we can do better, what we can work on, any facilities we need to, so after talking to Pat Paul, and getting recommendations, we realized that indoor had to be taken out. We then had our first pool feasibility study committee meeting. So obviously, we're trying to address what we're gonna be doing in the next few years at Father Max and Hawes. We started to look through past projects that the CPC has been used in other communities. We started to look at what other communities have done to see if this is kind of in line with what CPC projects have done in other towns. And Pat can attest, we found numerous towns that have used CPC funding to look at either feasibility studies or pool replacement, rehab, or rehabilitation. So it is, I think there are other communities, and I could list off 10 towns that have done it. I was actually looking
I
for
found like 33 examples of different either pool feasibility, pool replacement. I think I even found one for adding a bathhouse with a whole pool complex. So there's just examples on the coalition's database for projects involving pools.
Can you speak to the question of whether these other towns had a comparable number or size of pools, or tended to have fewer, or tended to have more?
Information for me, but I just
I'm looking impressionistically as much as anything else.
Yeah, Needham, for example, is everyone familiar with the facility they have down there? They use CPC funding, I believe, I put this down as one of my towns, to help rehab that whole facility. So it has been done before, and that, when we started looking at other towns that are doing it, we thought maybe this would be a good fit or a good opportunity to present a project to you, the CPC, with some architect design feasibility studies to really give us some concrete options as far as what we can look at for that pool and really look at everything. This design and this feasibility study with this architect firm would literally be a review of all of our facilities, a look at our summer program offerings and pool use, and then that would include recommendations based off of their observations and our facilities. And with those recommendations would become estimates, and then with those estimates would come schematics. There wouldn't be any design costs that would be in addition to this. This is just a recommendation phase one, what you're looking at. The pool feasibility committee is great. We've got a lot of great ideas, but nobody in this committee is an architect, and we're not by any means pool experts. So this design and this feasibility study would really help us and give us some guidance as far as what we should do, and kind of some teeth behind because we're hoping to make recommendations to the selectmen maybe during the winter, spring for the following fiscal year, next winter, spring, after we complete this study, for the following fiscal year to kind of give us some guidance as far as what we should do in the pools. So it's going to be a big decision, and I want to make sure, and I know the pool feasibility committee wants to make sure we're doing it right and we're looking at all options. And this architect firm is just an example. I know they put $59,500 down as a design cost, but the board recommended going a little bit higher because with procurement, there's no telling. It could be a little bit higher, so just to add a little bit of a buffer, they recommended adding, yeah.
5,000. 59,000.
I think that might have been a little bit more than that.
65,450 is what you're looking for, right?
I think Bernie wanted to go up to 75.
Move your papers, it goes up.
I know we traditionally have done 10% contingency, and we might not even need that much, but the board wanted to make sure that we had enough and not come back.
Have you checked it with Kathy? I mean, she's
Yeah,
fine with it.
Kathy worked with me.
Okay.
We work together well.
You get the first dive, is that?
No fun. Hey, you came with your eight material.
Oh, yeah. Anybody have any more questions on this project? John, please.
Yeah, just a comment. So
Yep.
I think it's a very detailed and thorough proposal.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna go with this company, it's just a kind of a start.
Yeah, it was, when I first took a look at it, I was actually quite shocked by the dollar amount. I thought it was really high.
Yeah.
But then I looked at the coalition website and did some research, similar to what
Yeah.
Travis did. And Hingham had the same thing, feasibility study and design plan for one specific pool. Project cost $75,000. and then Hamilton, town of Hamilton, I don't know
Yep.
where that is. But,
North
sorry,
North Shore.
North Shore?
Yep, sure.
They're very rich.
Planning and development for one pool, 53,000.
They have
Now,
trees.
also when I was,
Excuse me, John, are those examples where they're building a pool where there isn't one? Or are they like ours where they're rehabbing existing pools?
excellent question. These are the only two that I printed, but there were multiple on there. Some were filling in a pool and putting in a splash pad. Those
Thank you,
ones-
Mrs. Connie.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to know
Some
whether,
are- some are
it seems
full
like
replacements.
comparable work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these two are full replacements. I don't know if you saw the detail of these, but yeah, it's basically possible replacement of the pool and development, construction, of a pool in a park. So,
These pools are over 60 years old.
Yeah.
one other thing I did notice was that, it came to mind because I've driven past it, and our neighbors next door in Canton, they're actually redoing one of their pools
Yeah.
on Boulevard Street,
Yeah.
if you've seen that, and I'm sure you're,
Yeah, we're tight with the region, and like I said, Needham just finished theirs up. We're looking at ours. Canton's in the process of one right now. so
Did they use
actually-
these guys?
No, I vetted them through a couple other towns. Lexington used them when they did a couple pool remodels. They spoke very highly of them. But like Mrs. Carney said, when we put it out to procurement, this company might not even get it. But this is just the starting point. I was talking to other rec directors that gone through pool process, they would use for an architect. They recommended this company, and that's kind of how I got, that's kind of where I started with this.
Cheryl?
Okay, I have 3 questions for
Shoot.
you. You said you got the support of the selectmen?
Yes,
Do you have a letter?
I do not have a letter.
Okay, you're gonna get a letter for the packet,
Yep.
correct? Okay. Then my next question is, are they gonna look at, like, making one of the pools, only because it wouldn't be cost effective to do two, but to have one of them handicap accessible where you could actually take a wheelchair and go into the pool?
Everything's gonna be on the table. Like,
Everything's gonna be, okay.
Literally everything from turning FM into a spray park and then expanding Haas. And I know what you're asking, it's zero entry, so like you have,
Yeah.
it's like a slow.
Yep,
The only way you can make that happen is that if you eliminate the spray park at Haas, move it to FM and make that a big spray park, and then put your zero entry right where that spray park area is. Cause it's, unfortunately, conservation land's right there. I don't think
Yeah.
can't build on,
you can.
yeah, the footing of the pool. You have to go with where it exists. So that would be one of the only options, but they're looking at everything. That's just one example. So it's gonna be multiple recommendations. So I think that is gonna be on the table. And I would imagine that AD accessibility is gonna be a big piece of that.
Okay, my third question to it is, are they also gonna look at, only because I know Father Matt's your rough shaped pool, out of the two, it's worse than one or the other, half a dozen. Are they gonna look at, would it be cost effective to completely eliminate one pool, rehab another? Would that be an option in there?
Yeah.
To get the biggest bang out of the buck? Because doing pools aren't cheap. Because if you touch the pool and you rehab the pool, then you have to probably, odds are, rehab all the equipment that's treating the chemicals that go into the pool.
Yep, it's a big decision. They're gonna look at everything. Well, I'm
Okay.
sure that'll be one of the things they look at. I'd hate to eliminate a water element altogether at FM because we use it for camps. But I'm sure that'll be an option that they throw out there, because you've already invested 1.3 or 1.2 million dollars in a bathhouse. That pool obviously gets a lot of use.
Oh, you'd be dead meat if you
Oh, yeah,
eliminated that pool.
I would personally, I would love to see some sort of element at FM, whether that's a spray park or pool, me personally, but that's gonna be based off of what this architect firm comes back with and what the committee wants to do. That's not,
Both pools are deep, right?
Hawes is deeper, but yeah.
But only because I haven't,
It's only
I
Wanna go for a
don't.
swim in the
Okay,
summer?
I-
Over your head in the deep end, is that what you're
No,
trying to say?
no, I don't use the pools, but, do you have a kiddie pool?
No.
You don't have a kiddie pool.
Pause
have a
is
water
shallower,
park.
Pause is shallower than FM. We do all of our Todd classes, like swimming classes at Pause. But FM is a little bit, the shallower end is a little bit deeper.
What is your shallow? What are you classifying as shallow?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think it's like 3 feet, 2
Oh.
feet. The at
So you
Pause is
don't
like
have a
2.5.
kiddie pool?
No,
But they have the splash.
we have the splash park. That's our kiddie area.
Very
Yeah,
good splash park.
Exactly, it's a great splash park.
No, I love
Yeah.
your splash park. I think it's great.
Yeah, we do not
Okay.
have a kiddie pool.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Anybody have any other questions for Travis?
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks for the presentations.
Can I borrow 5 more minutes of your time?
No.
Talk about the existing project.
Existing project, 'cause this is
Please.
actually really good timing. So, Bond Street, and I know I might have told this through Peter, but I wanna make sure the board knows as well. So we tried to complete that project in October. We got all the site prep down, we removed all the 10 inches down of material, we got the stone dust down, we got the rubber perimeter lines ready to go, but the fall just didn't cooperate. I think we had 28 days of rain or 27 days of rain in October, and then the temperature dropped right after that. So we are right.
On street, sorry, I didn't hear that.
We are in line to hopefully get that project done at the end of March. That's completely weather dependent. We have to be, I think it has to be consistently above, I think 45 or 50 degrees to pour the rubber. Once we get that, we are basically first in line. Unfortunately, the playground has remained closed, but it almost worked out better because we don't need to do any of the prep work in the spring now. We can just pour the rubber and be done. So I'm hoping when we do lock in a date and we get that done, I'm hoping to have some sort of ceremony that I would like to have, make sure the CPC knows that they're welcome to and want to be at. So as soon as I lock in that date, I'll make sure the board knows. The project, from a budget standpoint, is under budget, so we just have one more piece to do, that poured rubber, and as long as that stays on budget, we should be on point on a budget perspective. So we are in good shape in that.
Good.
Sign? Is the sign included in it?
I haven't made the sign yet. Did we agree on the template?
I think we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can make the sign. I'll make sure the sign's up.
Maybe put a shrub around it or something.
Yes, exactly.
Yay!
Well, we made it.
I'm getting them one at a time, water on a rock, one at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
You got some landscaping in it,
We
right?
got poured rubber green before.
Perfect.
So,
You already had shrubs around the other signs.
That is true.
so that covers both your projects, or?
No, so this is the nitty gritty.
Okay, here we go.
This is the tough one. So Lower Balch, and I'll start with the budget because we ended the previous one with it, is good with the budget. We ran over a little bit with a contingency for some engineering for the handicap ramp, but we're hoping that handicap ramp will go out to bid, and I wish Kathy was still here, but we're hoping that will go out to bid in early March with a May-June completion for the handicap ramp. We're hoping to resurface the courts in June, July, so I'm hoping by the end of the summer that project will be done. When we started doing this project, I was gonna try to keep the playground, but after being down there and running programs down there during the summer and seeing how much the playground was in use, and when they put the playground in 99, there was no playground up above, right behind the elementary school. So right now, we have a playground, and 20 feet away, we have another playground. Doesn't really make a ton of sense. So I haven't done anything with it. I did get the selectmen's okay to possibly improve the playground area. And oddly enough, we're trying to go through a playground as a whole review with what playgrounds we should look at down the line to replace. And Balch, when I showed some of the other rec directors and people that came in what we're hoping to do down there, all of them were like, well, why don't you put your outdoor education area where your playground is? If you're not getting a lot of use there, it'll tie in nice. It's in nature. He's got wood chips. You got tree shades. It seems like a good fit. So it kind of morphed a little bit. What I'm proposing is that we change the whole skate park to an outdoor futsal, soccer, floor hockey area, and then maybe move the outdoor education area where the playground is currently. Not changing the project, it wouldn't impact the budget. It's basically just relocating the outdoor education area to where the playground is currently.
If you could send a note about that to Patrick,
Yeah.
so if anyone has questions down the line.
And the reason, and I included some pictures as well. So The first page is the old schematic and what we're hoping to do. The second page, if you flip it over, is what we are hoping to change it to. And if you continue to flip, you can see, so we did talk to an arborist, and this is where I need the CPC's input on. I talked to Mark Ryan, who's the tree, the tree commissioner, and I talked to the arborist that they use to do a lot of their work, Pathfinder. Obviously, the roots are a concern. The arborist had some concern about the roots. He said there might be some ledge or something underneath the trees that is making the roots come up. He said that they're not anchored down the way they should be. They're mature and healthy trees, but the roots are coming up, they're not going down. So if you think about it, the trees are anchored by the roots. If they're not going in the ground and they're coming up, that's not a good sign. So, exactly, so, sorry. What I would like to do is possibly have the 6 trees that are currently in there removed and plant new trees in that area, not 6, but 4, and I'd be happy to plant 4 more trees around town, wherever that likes. Just kidding. So they would be mature trees, so they'd still provide shade, 6 to 7 inch caliper trees. They'd be semi-mature, they're not gonna be little ones. I think this move will really help the whole area out a lot. I think it'll be a good fit, and then hopefully when we get the trail started with the Saint Street lots, it'll tie in very well. I think this move would be a good fit for the project, but I'm okay with taking the playground and then making the move, but I don't wanna, we are changing the project a little bit, and I don't really wanna make that move without making sure that you guys are aware, A, and B, okay with it.
Well, we've got another project where there's been a lively discussion about the use of money that we've appropriated for things that we didn't appropriate it for.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna see this being tarred with the same brush, so, if you can, send a note on everything you're planning to do differently.
Yeah.
Over to Patrick.
Done.
And, we'll send something back that either says, that all looks fine with us, or that says, we got a problem with this and we're fine with that, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, not a problem at all. Yeah, the old playground, it was put in in '99, and like I said, in '99 they didn't have a playground up top. The PTA did a good job. They fundraised. The playground up top is fairly new, and it would be. The school doesn't even use it. I've talked to Diane Ferreira, the elementary school principal down there. She's all for it. She really wants to make this happen. She think it'd be a good fit. Parents that watch the ball game would love an updated feature down there, whether it be nature related or playground related. Just because when they go to the ball game with their siblings and kids, to have them go up to the playground above can be a challenge. So I think we could obviously use that spot for nature programming during the summer. So I think there'd be a lot of people that benefit from the move.
Peter?
Yeah, just my suggestion as far as trees go.
Shoot.
Put them on the south side of the property so
Yeah.
you get the afternoon sun. I think maybe cutting this back a little bit.
Cut it back a little bit. Yeah.
And putting it in there so it shades that learning area.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
As far as that
The
goes.
playground area is a pretty big area. You can,
You might be,
yeah,
I mean, I hate seeing trees go.
I do too, and that's the hard part. To be honest, when we started this project, I did not think the arborist was gonna come back and say that. I thought we were gonna throw wood chips on the roots, and that way it wouldn't be an issue, and then we could put the playground elements on top, the nature elements on top of that, and we'd be good. But I was really shocked when he came back and he said that I would recommend them being removed. I can get other opinions, so this isn't necessarily the route we need to go down. He was just the first gentleman that Mark Ryan uses for a lot of their tree work in town.
I'll plant a couple trees up at Father Max by the pool. The
There you go.
south side there.
So we're still sharpening our pencil on this, so we're not a done deal yet, right?
Not a
Okay.
done deal.
All right, we'll belabor it later.
Just wanna make sure it's on the up and up, and I don't wanna do anything that, without changing a project without the board knowing.
Since we're talking about trees, though, I wanna look particularly at Cheryl.
Oh, yeah, it's killing me. Sorry.
What's killing me too, I'm Sustainability Commission.
Killing you in the sense that you're unhappy that we're in this position, but not that you think they're making a bad decision?
I'm
Or you're reserving judgment?
reserving judgment right now. I have to digest.
Okay, so you know that there is some agita
Oh, yeah.
here on
I'm
this.
okay keeping, like, that's just the recommendation that they came back with, I'm okay putting wood chips on and putting the playground in, it's
Okay.
not, yeah.
Cheryl?
Can I just ask you something?
Sure.
And it's not that I'm picking on you, because I do think that you do absolutely wonderful, wonderful things with that rec department.
Okay,
But I just sort of have a little bit of concern that you started off with one assessment, and then we rolled by the deadline and you changed it. Then we got this all approved through town meeting and everything, and now you're changing this. And I'm just hoping beyond hope that it doesn't become a pattern,
okay.
please.
Well, the pool's
But-
not from me, that's a committee recommendation, I'm just
Yeah,
following through with the
but-
committee recommendation.
But they missed the deadline for the submittal.
Okay.
And it was like one project was swapped for another, but I understood, and I understand why you did it. So I don't have a problem there. And like I said, I think you do wonderful, wonderful things. And I'm madly in love with the project at Bond Street.
Yeah,
So, but with that said,
okay, that's fair.
that, because we have rules that we have to keep for everybody. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no,
We can't play favorites.
I know, I get
Okay.
you, don't worry.
Okay.
To be, you know, I don't disagree with anything Cheryl said, but just to be fair, once the original proposal came in, it became a live item for our consideration. The fact that it changed significantly, but not in its fundamental nature, to me, meant that we are still working on the same proposal for legal purposes at least. It doesn't look like they came in proposing a livestock show and suddenly it's a rock concert. You know,
I'm with the livestock too.
and I saw Patrick nodding as I was saying this, so
Yeah.
perhaps you could add,
No, and Travis came and approached us about it, and I completely agreed because he submitted a proposal for an assessment. It was kind of the feedback we got from the board initially was that it's including indoor, it's not outdoor. You know, I didn't know Travis was gonna come back with a changed scope of work, but I thought he kind of met the deadline for our proposal. It got reworked due to the process of meeting with the committee, and I consider it, you know, exactly how John put it. You know, he changed from the original submission, but he still met the deadline of submitting something for an assessment, so.
No more money.
anything else for Travis?
Thank you for all your help.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you,
Sorry
guys.
for beating
Appreciate
you
it.
up, my apologies.
It's gonna get beat up every once in a while.
Thank you. And I
Thanks,
regret that I have to leave.
Yes, sorry, Ms. Esco has another commitment.
I do. Are there any other handouts that would be going out tonight before I leave?
Well, one of the things we're going to decide on is the process for making decisions, and someone will get that to you.
Bye, Travis.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Bye, Travis.
so
I stayed as
enjoy
long
the
as I
tea.
could.
Are you going to the league?
Yes.
It started at 7,
I
right?
know, I'm running over.
I'm gonna be there.
Yeah, okay, I'll see you.
What's it, the league?
Okay, so we,
Good night, ladies.
thank you, Judith. So if we go back to the agenda in order, Patrick, on recent invoices,
Just pretty much Travis. mentioned.
Already covered?
So we had the revision to his engineering quote for the lower vault. We did get an invoice with the chapel project, and I don't know if we want to go into that too much tonight, considering it's 7/16, but this was for design work for the HVAC system, which was, I believe, I don't want to put it to you, Joe, but I know it was a discussed item. with
I'm ready whenever you want to talk about it.
PVCC, and
We have to
so
wrap it up at 7:30.
that was kind of a back and forth, just because I wasn't sure if this was within the scope, and I guess through previous discussions, it was something that was already done by the PVCC, so I did approve that rec, it was for $850.
Right, and you had discussed that with
With
Joe.
you, yeah, with you.
I'm cognizant of the schedule. I don't think we can have a discussion within this meeting. But suffice it to say that we already have marching orders to try to see to it that our money is not spent if we have not approved it's being spent.
Absolutely.
And this may require some communications with other parties going beyond what we have done up to this point. And unless someone on the committee finds that more worrisome than promising, we'll go on to other matters.
Is he paying that invoice?
The little one has already been paid.
It's $850, right?
Yeah, $850.
And there was a rationale for that, which we can give you offline if you want to pursue it. I think the most important thing on the agenda remaining is how do we use our March to get our final decisions. Clearly, we've got a couple of these proposals where we're going to be getting some additional information. So we can't start any earlier, I think, than the 1st of March, and we could have up to 2 meetings in March. Last year, we tried a fairly elaborate scoring sheet approach that many people blew right past, and nobody was terribly excited by. So I'm thinking perhaps something a bit simpler, less numerical, and more grade and comment. I think it would be useful for everybody on the committee to look at the proposals and say, the project's okay in terms of its impact, the budget's okay, the connections with other key parties is okay. And the rest can be open discussion. And then we come in, and if we have, if everybody thinks all the projects meet this sort of basic acceptability and we can fit it in the budget, then we can discuss whether nevertheless there's a reason why we want to cap what we're spending. But it'll be more of a free-flowing discussion, which is what it turned into last year anyway. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds nice.
Okay. Can we make sure that everybody's got a full packet on each proposal in time for our first meeting in March? And in time before that, so that everybody has a chance to go through and make their notes on each project. And we won't try to add them up and average them, because this isn't that sort of thing. But hopefully it's in a format where, with a flip chart, we can quickly walk through and discuss where we need to discuss. Is that, everybody thinks that's
Sounds
okay?
great.
Sounds good.
Very good.
Peter.
My suggestion is like a cover sheet saying the name of the project and what is the dollar amount they're asking for, because we've got varying dollar amounts here that, like the pool project, the application says 65, Travis just said 75.
Yeah, I couldn't
Things
find
like
that either.
So we've got some
Yeah.
things that are,
Similar to this one.
That's a good.
I'll revise it.
yeah, and just, and with the Morse House, it was originally
Even more so.
and 50
Yeah.
now, and just so we know what the bottom line is that we're gonna be recommending as far as dollar amounts go. And just who the proponent is, not, we don't have to go into much detail as far as that goes with boom, boom, boom. Just that, so cause it's like, I'm reading this, I'm going, one page says something, another page contradicts it or supersedes it, it's just that point, that's all.
We want to know the total. We want to know that the underpinnings for the total have passed muster. That we believe the number. We want to know what it is we're buying, what is the current project proposal. And we want to know whether the people who have to say yes, like the owners of the property, have said so in writing. I think those are key. Every project needs that. Some may need other things, but every project needs that. John?
Also, what I can do is update the financial presentation. Not much has changed since the January 8th presentation, but it'd be nice to have it emailed out again, and I can get with Pat, and we can email it out
That'd be great.
prior, so that we have it in front of us, you know, because we're gonna add up the dollar amounts for the projects, and we gotta make sure we have, you know, the money to pay for them.
And because we're gonna need to decide which pockets the approved projects are taking money from.
Yeah.
So this will buy us some time there. Okay, Debbie,
Did we get the last load, or does that bounce to the next season? Remember from the state? Remember when we found, we lost the money, we found the money, the State House found it, they
surplus?
moved it, the surplus,
We
thank
did
you.
get the surplus.
So is that in this load's money, or is that?
Check with Mark Good, but I believe it is.
Okay.
I thought it,
It's not, the town received it, but it's not, I shouldn't, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your
The town received it, but anything that happens after the initial movement of money, the 10% allocation.
Oh, it goes to the next load.
We don't get credit, the CPC doesn't get credit for it until the end of the year when the audit is done, like September or October-ish.
when they closed the
They
book.
close the books, they move the pieces around, they say, okay, well, we thought it was 12, now it's 17, so we're gonna take the extra 5 and move it. So we can't use, we know it's there.
I think that's my question.
Yeah.
Would you mind giving us,
Yeah,
like, what we actually have in each pot?
Yep.
So that if we pull this out of that,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
this
the-
is what we've got, we're spending it all the way down to a nickel, or are we spending it all the way down to 10,000 or whatever?
Yeah.
I understand that that's money's there, it'll come in later, as long as we,
The bucketed amounts are pretty easy to go through, and they're very specific. It's that other chunk of money that's significant. You know, it's like $470,000. You know, a portion, what Joe was saying is, it may be on our books, but there's X amount that I can carve out that we actually can't appropriate. So I can carve that out for next.
that would be
meeting.
great, because, I mean, I
We've done
can,
that before.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
helpful for those of us that aren't accountants,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
don't even play one
Look
on
at
TV.
everybody except John.
Or, yeah, but you can do, anyway. And could we possibly get a figure of, the CPA has been in effect for X, and the town has both taken your tax dollar and received from the registry X.
Mm.
And then the state, simple,
Sort of
nothing.
history and time.
Yeah,
sort of thing? Sure.
just not that we're spending, it's in this bucket, it's in that bucket, we're just this is what we got, it's going all kinds of different places, but.
And I think if we had that, it would make a nice enhancement to our little half page in the annual report that they bind up. We could have a list of approved projects, we could have a very brief historical trend on money. I think a lot of people would find that relatable.
Good idea.
Okay, so this takes us to recording secretary. That's another thing where I'm not sure we have time for this meeting. Do you have any,
No,
1 or 2 minutes?
I know we pushed that off from the last meeting. I just don't know if we want to go through the process of putting that job application out there.
Can you give us one more turn of the wheel here?
Yeah,
We already agreed on it, no?
No,
Not,
we
not,
hadn't.
not exactly. Why don't we kick it over to the next meeting?
When are we meeting again? On the 26th of February, or are we into March?
That sheet hasn't
I think that's
changed,
the
that
next
big, long
question.
sheet you gave us, like a few months ago. You gave us a CPA sheet. Has any of that changed with dates?
Oh,
John and I have
the
a
project
conflict on the
meeting?
26th.
No, for meeting
Oh,
dates.
you have a conflict on the 26th?
I think we scheduled, we have our regular, was it,
Which meeting are
second
you
Wednesday of
thinking
the
of?
month, but then we include for another date.
CPA,
Public
you,
hearing for the Sustainability Commission.
Commission, we have a public.
Oh,
hearing.
that John and you, okay.
I'm sorry, John. No, not
Don't
the-
worry, you don't have anything else.
Oh, thank
We're
goodness.
on multiple committees together, too.
Well, we're having separate conversations. Do we need a meeting at the end of February? I think with the other information that's trickling in, we might as well just go to the March meeting, and then we have a second March meeting if we need it. Does that make sense to you, Patrick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we go
Makes
to
sense
March
to the committee.
11th?
That
Sounds-
Can't do the 4th because of moi and Concom.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
always,
The
Well, we
second
wouldn't have
Wednesday
used,
was-
normally we wouldn't have used that anyway, it's the
Yeah.
second.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
11th with the second Wednesday, so.
we did
All
already
right.
schedule it the second date in March, or at least temporarily.
Yeah, the
It was
25th.
25th, yeah.
Yeah,
So
11th
we
and
did
the
this-
25th.
When is it?
So
So the
we
next
may be
meeting would
giving
be
that
March
up, or we
11th.
might hold on to it in case we need a committee meeting or something.
Yeah, so I mean, same thing for
Subcommittee.
February 26th, I think we put a temporary, if we don't need it, then we don't need it, but we always have our regular scheduled
Right.
March meeting, and then we also have the 25th as another meeting in case we need it, which probably would be the case for March more so than February, just because we're.
Yes.
Get enough conclusions
Yes.
by then, yeah.
Peter?
Wouldn't we have to schedule a public hearing for the 25th of March? Because otherwise, we're gonna be in April doing our public hearing. And that's within a month of town meeting. So we have to be able to present our things for the warrant before, I think we meet in April. So I think I think we should advertise it March 25th as our public hearing.
Okay, that means we need to come out of the 11th with decisions made.
We have 4 projects, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's impossible,
No.
but that is,
Do we have to have decisions made though? For the
Well, we
public
want to have the
hearing?
public hearing, no, we want to have the public hearing and then make our final, to get that to
Decisions after. yeah.
the town meeting.
oh, you mean we should look as if we're listening to the public?
Oh. Cameras are rolling.
Moving right
Might want
along.
to rephrase that, John.
But to that point, I was trying to do the calendar math as well, but Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but how much time do we need between a public hearing posting and the actual public hearing?
Yeah, I would so we have the 25th, I would have to post it, on March 2nd,
Yeah,
so that would have to get.
so it's
updated.
so it's
our next
before
meeting.
our next meeting, so
Yeah.
we'd have to really decide that now.
Motion to
I mean, you could always do it. as a
Second.
continuation.
Second the motion.
schedule a public hearing for.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
We have approved a date for the public hearing. Patrick, if you can just remind us of what we need to have together for such a meeting, you know, what we'd be presenting and such. If we're going
I
to,
think, like, just do what we did last year, put it to the applicants to provide a presentation. That
so the public hearing is only about 4 projects, it's not about anything else CPA related.
No, exactly.
And all we do need to check on the availability of our proposers for that
Yeah,
date.
yeah, and so, I mean, I'm thinking back to the Morse House project too, they don't find out until, what, the 25th? I think they say they have 2 weeks.
For the select.
Yeah, 25th would be them,
Yeah.
25th of February.
So,
I'll give them a month.
yeah. I'll give them a month to do a
February.
presentation.
Just a
Yeah.
point of information, don't we only have 3 projects? What's the 4th one?
The old parish cemetery?
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at these 3 on the agenda, and we've already passed that one, so, okay. Never mind. Thank you.
No, the 25th, yeah.
Old Parish Cemetery went from first out the door.
Yeah. How soon may we forget?
Okay, so we got a meeting on March 11th where we're gonna do our scoring and everything. And meeting on March the 25th where we have our public hearing. And then the first meeting in April will be,
I'm getting 2 things.
I guess,
What's in the code?
whatever the second Wednesday in April is.
9.
9, 8, April 8th.
And at that point, we bless the projects, I guess, that have passed muster with the
What was your
public
April?
or been
April 8th?
modified by them.
My father's birthday.
And when is town meeting, I guess?
May 11th.
Oh, the 11th?
May 11th?
And so we know enough to put things on the warrant, even though the final details
Yeah,
will emerge,
we already have the format of how we write our motions and everything. so.
okay? So,
We appear to be in very good order.
Just say
that's so
yes.
rare
Just
that we
say
should
yes.
just enjoy the moment.
Sounded like a motion to adjourn.
We should adjourn, is it? You said
Before I yielded the public will on that, is there anything that can be said about the status of the Carillon or your pavilion, Cheryl?
No, motion to adjourn.
We'll take that as a no.
Patrick, on the, who's liaison on the Carillon is?
So the Carillon, they have made some progress. They sent out a bid for some of the initial work, which is good because progress is good. But then I was just looking over an email that Lee sent me at the end of January that the potential elevator project in Town Hall could impact the access to the Carillon.
Oh, boy.
So,
Moving parts of it.
I'm sorry?
No, yeah, I'm just talking.
So the fate of the elevator and whether or not that's gonna happen may or may not
We're making
impact,
interest on this money?
may not impact. So they made some progress, but one step forward and potentially two back.
Okay.
And Cheryl, after you're done banging your head, did you have anything to tell us?
No, okay, so Ramonda actually has been asking on a regular basis, has ours gone out to bid? We haven't gone out to bid. So now we're trying to get a meeting together with Ramonda and Mark Ryan, because Mark Ryan graciously is gonna bail us out on this, and he will do the site work and pour the concrete for us.
Nice.
Which will actually save money, and then we just have to bid on the pavilion, and that pavilion will go up like that. It just, day and a half, and that pavilion's up.
Do you have a conversation in parallel with
Yes,
With the
yes,
Kathy
yes,
Carney or
yes,
whoever it
Yes,
is?
yes, we
Okay.
do on a regular
I
basis.
won't ask for details, that you're about to have something.
Yeah,
Cow.
Yes, some sort of large
we
animal.
need a captain.
And,
I think we're unraveling quickly, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
haha.
Second.
Thank, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.